Thank you very much for coming. So I will start by asking you to say your name and where you are working now.
You go first.
Should I start? All right. My name is Stefanie. I currently work at Caritas Schweiz, the sector. Young Caritas is the sector, the youth sector of Caritas Schweiz here in Lucerne.
Super.
My name is Noah, and I currently work at Accenture Song, which is some kind of design consulting firm. And I work as a service designer, which is a really broad term, but encompasses different kinds of design work.
Nice. And can you share with us, what do you do? Daily job.
Daily job. For me, I have a position that is kind of a traineeship position. It is the duration of a year, and it gives me the chance to really have a glance into the NGO that Caritas Schweiz is. So I have my daily work, it really depends, and it will also be changing for the next year.
Okay.
But what I have to do, what is part of my job, is also communication work. It is project work. We have projects with volunteers, so also coordination of people and volunteers. And we also have like event management.
Okay.
But the list goes on. We also do school visits, so informing teenagers about the topics of Caritas, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say similar to you, it's a very kind of dynamic job because it's also project-based. So maybe like projects in sequences of 3 to 4 or 5 months. And so far in my around 2 years, I think I did quite a broad work in the design sphere. So really from kind of granular UX or even UI design projects where you really work on like screens and wireframes and user flows to very kind of strategic projects where you use design to kind of calibrate organizations and tell them where to go next. Or maybe in the middle, more like really classic service design projects where you reimagine how a service is delivered or how employee experience can be changed. I think the common denominator for all of the projects is that we really try to bring in a lot of research. I think that's a big role of ours as external consultants, to really take the time and listen, even if it's like, I mean, if it's about UI research, so what do people think about colors and buttons, or if it's really about expert interviews on the more strategic side.
Nice. And Stefanie, do you also have the possibility of doing research in your shop?
Currently not, not in my position. But I recently had a talk with my team leader, and there might be the possibility of working on certain projects or like creating more projects, and their research and like analysis and such will take maybe a role, but it's never at the level of what you do at Accenture Song because of the resources.
And this is a question for both of you regarding research. So when you talk with your manager, was that something new? And when you talk with clients, is that something new? Or when you said design research, they understand what are you talking about?
I think for me, it depends a bit on what kind of client you're talking to, because I can give you an example. If you talk to someone that is from the design department of an organization, of course, they know the value, but like we are now, for example, working with someone from the HR department, which has a very different view on research. So when we talk about research, we also have to find like a common understanding, because for them it's numbers and kind of quantifiable information, which we as designers cannot give them. But then we made a really positive experience because we took them to do the field research with us, which was some form of shadowing. So looking at the way people work in the HR organization. And after one session, the person realized kind of the value, because you see so much between the lines, I think.
Nice. HR is a nice area.
Yeah, really interesting.
So for me, I guess it depends. And I think I would not use the word design research in the context that I work, just for me to be able to make, to really bring across what we're talking about. And I think they have an understanding of what needs to be done in order to like create a project or set up something, maybe not as detailed, and maybe they would use other words, but they can kind of comprehend that there would need to be some kind of research, but not in a very deep level of understanding what the term would also, what all belongs to design research.
That's interesting, because sometimes the role of the design manager is seen like that of the translator. So instead of referring to design research, you could say we need to learn about this because we don't know. We need to understand what's taking place, and hence we can do shadowing or observations. So is that something that you think you do in your daily shop, that you do this translating of things with clients or managers or different teams?
Yeah, I think definitely to some extent, translating as well the knowledge that I have gained during my studies in more maybe comprehensible, understandable form to people, why it might be necessary, how would it look like, in this way translating, because I think it's not something they might be very familiar with. So, more creating an understanding.
Yeah, I think creating an understanding is kind of the right way to put it, because you also have to, I mean, as you said, you kind of also have to understand where the other person is coming from, and a lot of the time they are from very different backgrounds, but you also have things in common, and sometimes more than you think, and you kind of have to find them as well. And in my experience, I think it's like sometimes as designers or design managers, we tend to be a bit in this kind of ivory tower position where we throw around a lot of terms, like really kind of, like a lot of very conceptual terms that we really have to bring to the ground. I think especially also in my example, like, because the clients want to see like real things, you know, and kind of understand what they're getting. And that's sometimes it's even a bigger part of the job than we might like it to be, because you really have to guide them a bit. And it's really important, but it also takes time and energy. But it's really important for the success of whatever you are doing.
And when you look back in retrospect to the 3 years of the program, what were the skills that help you do what you are doing today?
Now I need to think back. But I think for me, like, I thought about this question a bit. It's really hard to put it into specific skills. Like, I think at the end, it's really kind of your thinking that is shaped in the 3 years, and probably there's skills as part of that, but really like this, I don't know, like, I don't want to call it design-led way of thinking, but it's kind of that, like, really, like, establishing the design process in your way of approaching things. I think that was the biggest kind of takeaway. And then, of course, like, all the skills that you learn to actually live that, you know, to put it from thinking into reality.
So the approach of facing a space or a reality.
Yes.
Yeah, I would also say like the approach, and also what belongs to the approach is just being interested in where another person comes from, like in this part of seeing their reality and or finding out their reasons for doing something. and then also being able to communicate an understanding that is maybe more the approach that we gained, or just different understandings to what they are used to. And I think that's a big skill that I think I learned, like how to communicate something in an understandable way that can be complex. And also, how like the process of how to approach certain things, then also some methods that we learned. But it's sometimes hard to really do if you're the only one that has this mindset or has this approach or has this knowledge of doing it this way. So I think a lot of it is like understanding and maybe translating and making other people see that there might also be another way
to consider. It's interesting because one of the things that one of the ways you learn is working in teams. And so for many years we realized that the students were saying that one of the skills was teamwork, but when you start talking about, you realize that when you are working with others, and it could be in the context of a school or it could be in the context of an organization, you learn to communicate different perspectives, different points of view, but also gain where is the other person standing, why the other person is not considering this point of view, why the other person never thought of that. So it's very interesting to see what is learned through working in teams. And sometimes it's not an easy process. And sometimes we believe that it will be much, much easier to work on our own. But when you work with complex situations, you cannot work on your own. So what you are saying also relates to me to working in groups in the school and learning to collaborate. So it's the learning to collaborate that then after can be transferred. What was a daily life in the classroom can be transferred to daily life in the organization. Yeah,
I think in a way, still it is very a different space and environment. But I mean, I've known before beginning this study that I am a person that likes to work in teams and with other people, but it has just, this knowledge has grown, and I know now also maybe why it is important to work in teams, and I would now never want to start a project on my own. I realize how I always seek for feedback and seek for an exchange with others, because I'm very used to doing that, and I really see the value in it, because I know that my ideas might not be the best one. Often they are not the best one, they're just ideas that they need some other evaluation than only my own.
Different perspective, gaining different perspective. Do you have questions?
I have a question to Stefanie. I was wondering, because I imagine that you're in a social field, as a mainly a social area working, and I'm wondering in which way is the activities that you do, and whoever is involved, in which way are they regarding the outer environment of Caritas? In which way is what you're working on reactive to what is happening outside of Caritas, or in which way is it maybe also proactive in the way that you are exploring other areas of engagement with specific groups of people, maybe trying things out, doing experiments, and if yes, how far would that go, or is it more on that spectrum, from reactive to very proactive? Where are you there?
Interesting, because I think where I work, the youth sector is also just very small sector in Caritas as a whole, and I have I know things about Caritas as a whole, but I'm not an expert in that. But I think I see both, and it depends on, yeah, sometimes things really only have to be reactive in the Caritas organization as a whole, because when a catastrophe strikes, it's always a reactive kind of thing that takes place, but also in a way they react but try to do it sustainably. So react but not only work or like support in just this small space, but try to have a project that's longer. But there are also things that are maybe, yeah, proactive. But I think it's harder to push the proactive activities because there is enough to do already in the day-to-day business and in the reacting to maybe a certain demand or a certain need. And I think that also has to do with maybe, yeah, the mindset or the approach that the organization has, and that is in a transformation process right now. I don't know what will come out of it. But for me, in my position, as I've now talked to the team leader, it's also that we would like to do some stuff that's more proactive as well, to not only always respond to needs. Yeah.
And I think that that might be a constant challenge in most organizations. How do we create a space in the organization for reflection so that innovation is possible? The process of transforming the organization is a constant thing, but it's also exhausting, right? So if we are constantly changing, it can be exhausting. And where to find that space for reflection and for innovation. I mean, we have a course that is called the Learning Organization. So how do you create that space for learning that is related to reflection so that the organization can move forward and not get stuck? I think that is a challenge for most organizations. Not all of them, but most, I would say.
Yeah. I think that it's an important thing, and I see in a organization such as Caritas, it's really important to be able to also have this space for innovation, but it's not an organization that is used to do such a thing, as well as if you're an NGO that's based on donations, you also have to be always looking at financials, like where can you, how much money is coming in and where can you use it, and you first of all, you use it for really your daily activities, and then you see if there is more money, you can use it for also. But it also I think some mindset also has to shift, that there still needs to be room for this constant process of proactiveness and innovation still, and not as just when we're done with all of the other things and have more time and money, we'll do it.
Do you have more questions?
Yes, I'd like to ask both of you, looking back, what would you have liked to have more of at DMI? Or what was missing, in your opinion, to help you have more effect in your professional life?
Good question. I think it's hard to say, but what I have struggled with since graduating is also because I'm more interested to work in the social sector, which is a sector not really so much familiar with design as when you go straight into like design organization, is maybe how can you approach a project with this mindset and with this approach that we have learned in an organization that is not doing that in this way, or how can you help and support them to find the ways of doing so and have this maybe transformation process starting in a way, or support them in the process of doing so. But that's very specific to my case. What I would have maybe learned, would have wished to maybe know how to handle this situation in this case.
Yes, I will also answer specifically to my case. I think it's a very tricky question, and maybe I will turn it around a bit and put it more like if there was one more additional year, because I think for me personally, what I am missing a bit now in retrospective is really kind of like a concrete specialization a little bit. I think it's a really good thing that we are really good generalists and are able to adapt super fast to different contexts. But when I look at other designers that I know and work with that have a very similar skill sets to mine, what they usually have on top is like a, you know, like the T-shaped thing where they have a specialization where they really go in depth. And I don't know what that could be, but I think also, I mean, there are really great other programs here at HSLU, for example, graphic design or digital ideation. I think that's super relevant if you look at the design job markets today too. I mean, it's really competitive and it doesn't hurt usually to be able to design on Figma, for example, or topics like that.
And it's changing very quickly also the design landscape of shops and where designers are working.
I must say I really like your answer. I also agree with you. And I think it goes a bit into my answer that it's like struggling in this specific field that I don't have the knowledge in that much, but I have this broad knowledge of the design management. Yeah.
When we believe at least that we have a program where throughout the program you start realizing what you would like to do, or also what are you good at, what are your strengths, and what future areas you would like to explore. Do you think that within that space you realize, oh, I would like to work in service design, or you saw an opportunity for you in service design? And Stefanie, that you realize, I would like to work more in the social related areas and not in finances, for example, and in a non-profit organization instead of a business organization or government organization. Did you have that?
I think for me, yes, like as you basically said it, like we had the service design course, I think with Hans Kaspar, and I kind of got a glimpse of what the process is roughly, what are the methods, how does it work, because it's a very abstract kind of way to do things still. And then on top of that, I had the internship opportunity where I kind of got to get a bit of the specialization. So actually, I think the internship is also a good way to get that if you're, I don't know, if you manage and if you're, I mean, I wasn't aware that that was what I was doing back then, exactly. But now looking back, I realized, okay, actually I got it through that 6 months. So yeah, I think it was a combination of that.
And it's interesting because when I talk with my colleagues that are working in service design, they have a lot of difficulties explaining what they do when they get a client. So I think that once you move from those specific disciplines of design, like graphic design or object design or interaction design, it's much more difficult for people. As broader you go from service design or design management, it's much more difficult for people to understand how do you help an organization.
And I think the design term is also a dangerous one sometimes because every person has a very, very different understanding of the words design. It's really...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that both terms are problematic, design and management. But I am in a period now realizing that most terms are problematic because if you talk about sustainability, a lot of people understand sustainability in different ways, from what type of materials we are talking about to human rights. So you have a big spectrum, or a lot of people now understand sustainability as saving or reducing CO2 emissions. So it's one word, and you have a very diverse understanding of what we are talking about, and hence the discussions are very different. And the same happens with design. The same happens even perhaps with education. What is education? And that's very interesting, because I think, and in something that you see in the projects that we have here, or we are showing right now here, is that one of the skills you see is the skill of exploring possibilities, bringing people to say, what can we try doing something different? And that connects to what you were saying at the beginning, that organizations sometimes don't have this space for reflection, and hence a space for innovation, where there is a possibility of trying something new. And I think that design managers bring that possibility of, it could be something small, or it could be something big, like can we try connect with schools in a different way, or can we try working together in a different way? I think that that is a skill, key skill of design managers. Now, if you put in your CV, I am good at exploring possible ways, there are not many people looking for that, unfortunately, right? Although there is very much needed in organizations.
And like now, I really like your point now that I think about it. It's not like something that you really have tangibly in your hand, such like any other skill. So maybe, like reflecting now about my answer, I think there is a specialization. It's just very intangible at the end. Like it's, as you said, like it's really more like your approach and maybe way of looking at things. Maybe that's the specialization that you actually have.
It is very intangible. I will say more and more that we work with very subtle spaces. They are not easy to grasp, and requires not just to observe, perhaps with a caring lens of what's going on in this process, of what's going on in this collaboration. So it requires different skills. That skills of going not just, this is what I see, but what is taking place when, I will give you an example. So every time I see students working in teams, and there might be a student that have the temptation of saying, don't worry, I do it. The moment I said, don't worry, I do it, I am removing from her the possibility of learning. And hence, there is an discomfort that might appear. And that might affect how the team starts working together. That you can take in an organization in very different skills, or scales, sorry. So there might be very subtle things that happen in the working together that affects the overall interaction, and hence the process that we are designing, or the strategy, or whatever else we might be designing. And it's very, very subtle.
But maybe a question for you, and like now that we think about it, is how do you make that tangible for an employer? For example, like let's take a really, like how would you then measure someone's performance, for example, if it's those subtle interactions?
One way, I think, that is through conversation. And if that conversations, you create a visualization, it could be a map or a visualization of what has happened. It could be a process that is visualized. Then that make it, once it is visible, it's tangible. Or once I hear it, I realize, I am aware. So it is tangible, but at a different level. So you become aware that, this is what is taking place. So we work in very subtle spaces. And hence it's difficult to explain or to make it concrete. Examples can help. And sometimes you are not even aware of what process you are facilitating. Even if we are talking about facilitating a collaboration or facilitating a visualization, you are not really aware of what is being visualized. other than a process. And there are processes of relating. I think that systems is very much living in relationship. That's what you learn, and that's even what you learn when working in teamwork. You learn to live in relationship with other people. And then hence you go to an organization and you are working in relationship as best as you can with others. And then what you are doing with HR is helping them to work in relationship with others. So what kind of process and strategies you design to help them work at their best in circumstances that are uncertain, that they are changing or have financial uncertainty, like in non-profits. So how do you do that? Do you have more questions, or we can wrap up? I don't know if Maher.
Questions up by the comment.
Yes.
Your question here of performance, right? You said that the things that you bring to the table are these intangible, fuzzy things, right? The first thing you need to do about that is reflect yourself. What you did to help achieve what the group achieved, right? What was your contribution? Then you can talk about it. And the second thing is that when we talk about performance evaluation organizations, they usually talk about meeting objectives, right? So deadlines and, I don't know, profit or whatever it is that you guys measure, right? And that's where the specialist comes in. Oh, we had so much advertising and this created this, right? So you don't have that, right? Your performance is through managing a process and showing how that process worked to deliver the things that the group was able to deliver because they had that process or whatever it is that you do, right? The fact that you made the communication happen, right? You didn't do it maybe, it was the expert talking about his field, but it was you who contributed. So I had never thought about this until you said it now, really, in this way. So it starts with your self-reflection. How did I contribute to the success of the group, right? And then linking that, what you did, to the success of the individuals in the group that do get the reward because it's attributed to them, right? So this is quite a tricky question.
Yeah, I mean, I also don't really know the answer. I also think it depends on your self-reflection, yes, and it also depends on how you're perceived by others, like the feedback that you get and how they see your contribution, because that's also something that I learned, like with the really small things that we do, for some people it's really out there and like they never thought about that. Yeah. And you know, in this reflection that wouldn't come up for me, because it's like one example is I got the feedback that our team is very grateful, like that we always say thank you at the end of the meetings and like at every contribution, and like you would never think about that because for us it's like it's a given. So yeah, I think it's a bit a combination of that, and it's also, I mean, the question why I ask myself and also Germina that is because, I mean, my organization is a very output focused one, and I think what we do is not, you can't really put it in the form of how they would measure different outputs from other parts, you know. So yeah.
It could be that is very output driven too. Can I give you an example from my practice? So I was working within inpatient hospitals, so hospitals that pass from the emergency department to other departments. In this case was gastroenterology. There is a need to do a colonoscopy in order to understand what's taking place or what's happening in the intestine. And when you are not feeling well, drinking liters of laxative and going to the toilet constantly is not an easy task. So, but if the process of preparing the intestine for the colonoscopy is not well done, then the colonoscopy cannot be performed. And so there are delays, there are cancellations, you have a team of an anesthetist, a gastroenterologist, waiting for a patient that cannot be really, the colonoscopy cannot be done. So the team contacted me and said, okay, how can we educate patients and educate families about colonoscopy? And when I started doing observations and understanding what's taking place, you realize that was not really a need to educate the patient. What was needed was a need to foster a collaboration between nurse, families, and patients. And then you start thinking about how do we do that? And so I designed a tool that was like a placemat to explain what is an intestine, what is the goal of a colonoscopy, what will happen in 5 steps, but also was a tool to track. So have you drinking, not drinking, where are you in how your stool look like? I'm pretty solid or not solid? So that action can be taken together. We can together modify what's going on and make decisions so that the output, if it is the output, the colonoscopy, if it is the outcome restoring health, can be achieved. So those are examples, even if it is outcome-driven or output-driven. So what was that I designed? I designed several things. Or what was that I was doing? But basically I realized that there was a tool for helping 3 different parts work together so that other parts could work together too.
Mm-hmm. I just have a question that came up because I was also occupied with this question this morning at another workshop. You said they asked you to come and help or support in this process. Yeah. For me, this is kind of something I'm asking myself, how can we be the people that come out of and be the ones that get asked to support in a process, as we're kind of taught to do, that we are not always like the ones initiating or like building up something, but being invited into a space to then be a support in this process. And I feel like it's, for me, now, like still at the very beginning of my career, it's hard to find out how can you be the person, how can you make others sense that you can be the person that supports them in this process or in any process that they might need support, if that's a clear question.
Yeah. So one thing that for me is important is that I stop explaining what I do. And I don't expect people to understand what I do. So, but I also learned through many years not to be frustrated if they come and said, can you do a campaign? And I go like, oh no. Now I need to explain that I am not someone from marketing or a graphic designer or whatever you go. And I understand that they are asking for my help, and that's my starting point. What is believed at this point is that there is a need to do something, education. So let us start there. So I'm also open myself to see, okay, what's going on? Rather than saying closing, because what I'm asking is not what I can contribute or what I can contribute at my best. So it used to be a space for frustration. Now I take it as it's okay. It's a given. It's a given that they will not understand. And so let us start together. That's what they understand. Like you were saying, we're working in collaboration. That's okay. let us start with what they understand. And that's the space for me where there is an opening to see what's taking place and how I can help a group of people move forward in whatever it is. And if we start with a belief there is a need to educate patients, that's okay. Let us start there. And we might end up in a very different place. And I also see it once they come, I said, okay, there is a need to educate the patient as a possibility for mutual learning. Why do you believe that the need is to educate the patient? And why do you believe that this is what I can do? And what's behind that? And I have to also accept that the reason why they believe that I can help in certain ways is because of designers. So, or because of what we do, and sometimes because of what we have done to trying to explain to clients, simplification that we have done to try to explain to clients what we do. So I try to start where they can start. And if it is with, there is a need to educate the patient, let us start there. So I don't know if it is as an acceptance or an opening. And I do believe that it is through working together that we can learn. I learn, they learn, we all learn together. I was not aware, or when I started that project, that what was needed to do. I was like, aha, this is what is needed to do. There is a need to foster a collaboration between people that are very busy, or a person that is very busy as a nurse, and someone that is in pain. So how do you foster that collaboration? And the worst thing that I could have done is to give a patient a training booklet or something, because the patient is in pain and discomfort. But that was what was believed to be done. Now, to start closing, Maher have not made me any signs about the time, but to start closing, in retrospect, what if you were to meet yourself 3 years ago when you started studying, or 4 years ago or more, what you have recommend yourself, or what you have told Stefanie at the time, Noah at the time, starting to study design management?
The first thing that comes to my mind, because we just talked about this other question, is be ready to be frustrated and accept frustration as part of the process during the studies and after the studies.
In life.
In life, yeah, actually, I think it's something, maybe I'm still young, but I was also very young after high school coming to study, and maybe not having experienced that frustration is helpful and belongs in this part of the process. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah, I would second that. But maybe to add, I think I would, like, one piece of advice would be maybe to be a bit more experimental, or a bit more daring, and a bit provocative, because I realize now, like, those 3 years that we get are really like kind of the space where you get to do that, and where you can try things, you can, I don't know, see how different methods and approaches work in kind of like a safe space where you have this flexibility. And once you enter, I mean, depending on your job, of course, you still have some leeway, but I think it's, yeah, I could have done that a bit more now in retrospective.
And what would you recommend us to help the students be more daring or more explorative, and to help them deal with the frustration? And also the frustration is part of life, not necessarily, and it depends for whom.
I think, and this was something that I realized during the thesis process, is that you really kind of have to be proactive in bringing in your own interests, and that will make it a space where you want to be exploratory and kind of try new things. So really being a bit vulnerable maybe, and bringing in like personal interests, because it's school. You still can kind of bring that, and it's okay. So I think if it's, I don't know, an industry that you're interested in or a really specific topic, I think there's a lot of courses that you have the opportunity to bring that to the table.
Yeah, and maybe also let them have the opportunity, the students have the opportunity to maybe see outside of the bubble in a way, and experience real life as part of the course in a way, in certain small, I don't know how to do it, but like the internship is like one part where you have things like that, or maybe projects, or have somebody come in, tell about like a real experience, make it a more tangible. The bubble is very nice because it's, as you say, it's also good for protective bubble of now you can really like grow and learn and experience and experiment. But also maybe sometimes let something also inside of the bubble, or like let the bubble be a bit more burst a little bit, but then the students are able to come back to the bubble and reflect and maybe prepare or like, I don't know, adjust according to what they maybe have seen when they tapped a little bit outside.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It was very nice to talk to you and
Likewise.
come back to the bubble.
Yeah, it's always nice to come back.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Much
thanks.
appreciated.
Thank you as well.
Thank you.
Really nice.